Nutrition is the set of biological, psychological, and sociological processes involved in obtaining, assimilating, and metabolizing nutrients for the organism. The energy that comes from the food is known as a calorie. Is the amount of heat of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water. The nutrients. A nutrient is a substance that usually comes from the diet and that plays essential roles in the metabolism. Macronutrients. They get their name because they are required in large quantities and are necessary to produce energy and form new structures. Macronutrients. They include three important groups of nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Carbohydrates. They are the primary source of energy in the diet. Carbohydrates are obtained from foods such as fruits, cereals, and legumes, although they are also present in foods such as soft drinks, sweets, chewing gum, artificial juices, chocolates, to mention a few. These foods provide carbohydrates that are called simple and are not recommended to be consumed in high proportions since the excess is related to overweight, diabetes, and other diseases. The proteins. They are necessary elements because of their role in different functions of the organism. For example, they have a role in the immune system. They also act as enzymes that allow the various chemical reactions to take place in the organism, and they are part of the muscular structure and other organs and systems. Proteins are made up of amino acids which are classified as essential and non-essential. Lipids. This group corresponds to fats. During adolescence, this nutrient is essential since it is required for healthy growth and development, as well as for a proper hormonal functioning. Fats store energy and provide more calories per gram than carbohydrates and proteins. Then we have macronutrients. They take their name from the amount of them that is required, which is minimal. The name of macronutrients doesn't mean that they lack importance so we can live without them, since they have a vital role for us. For example, they participate in the immunology system or metabolic routes as intermediaries within these organic compounds necessary for specific chemical reactions. Uh, each micronutrient is described below. Calcium. This mineral is vital because it constitutes part of the bone mass, and almost half of the bone mass a person will have for the rest of his life is made during adolescence. This later is the period when more calcium is reabsorbed by the bone compared to any other stage of the life. Iron. Among the factors that cause a significant increase in iron requirement during adolescence are growth acceleration, increase in blood volume, and the onset of menstruation in women. The zinc. Zinc is another critical element during adolescence since it is required for the mineralization of bones, sexual maturation, synthesis of proteins, and nucleic acids. Vitamin D. This vitamin is considered essential to facilitate the intestinal absorption of calcium and phosphorus. It can be synthesized inside the organism as long as there is sunlight exposure to the skin. Folic acid. It is an essential vitamin during the reproductive age, therefore its use is recommended as a preventive measure. In the case of men, it is necessary, especially in the last stage of adolescence, to meet the requirements for the accumulation of muscle mass. Balanced diet. Diet is a set of foods and dishes that are daily consumed, regardless of whether they are many, few, adequate, or inadequate. The characteristic of a good balanced diet is that it is complete, balanced, safe, and enough. And now the diseases. Eating disorders. Eating disorders are the result of a combination of genetic, neurological, psychological, and sociological factors. We have overweight and obesity. These conditions reflect an imbalance between the calories consumed and those spent. Anorexia nervosa. A food restriction below the requirement leads to a very low weight, lower than the minimum expected for the age and height of a person. Bulimia. It is characterized by a recurrent binge eating with behaviors that are called compensatory.
Now I will talk about the digestive system. It is essential to recognize how we obtain nutrients to grow and energy for our daily functioning. Structure and function. The digestive system is responsible for preparing food so that the cells can use them. There are two types of digestion: mechanical and chemical. In mechanical digestion, food is broken into smaller and smaller pieces, and in chemical digestion, food is broken down into small molecules of the chemical energy. The first modification occurs in the mouth. Chewing divides the food mechanically into small fragments so that they can be swallowed and come in contact with digestive enzymes. Saliva is added in the mouth. The digestion begins with the degradation of starches. The bolus that forms in the mouth passes through the esophagus to reach the stomach, where proteins are degraded. At this time, this material is called chyme and passes into the small intestine, where bile and pancreatic juice are added. Here also occurs the highest absorption of nutrients, and the mixed material is known as chyle. The larger intestine, the chyle absorbs water, and the remaining material is eliminated by defecation. Phases of digestion. The brain sends messages to the digestive system, which also occurs through the smell and taste, as a preparation to receive food. This phase is called cephalic. When the bolus reaches the stomach, it is distended and the hydrochloric acid is released. This moment is called gastric phase. Now, the chyle in the small intestine triggers the endocratic reflex, which will limit the entry of more food. This phase is the intestinal one. The structure of the digestive system consists of mouth, tongue, salivary glands, esophagus, pharynx, stomach, liver and gallbladder, pancreas, small intestine, and larger intestine. The mouth and salivary glands. The mouth is covered by mucus inside. These are the teeth and tongue. The teeth are solid organs, and their role is to crush the ingested food to ensure their better assimilation. The tongue is a muscular structure. Its mobility allows the chewing and swallowing of food. There are three salivary glands attached to the mouth. The paroid is the largest, and it is in front of the external air canal and the angle of the jaw. The sublimaxillary is located in the fossa, in the submandibular region under the horizontal branch of the jaw. The sublingual is located below the floor of the tongue, in front of the sublimaxillary glands. Pharynx, muscular structure that communicates the mouth with the esophagus, and the nasal cavity with the larynx. The contraction of the muscle of the pharynx pushes the food into the esophagus during swallowing. Esophagus. The esophagus is a tube 25 to 30 centimeters long, running from the neck to the abdominal cavity, passing through the thorax. The esophagus makes the connection between the mouth and the stomach. Swallowing. Swallowing involves a deliberate step in which the food gathered in bites are pushed backward by the tongue. Then comes a phase called reflex that is not controlled by will, in which breathing stops, the larynx is blocked, and the upper part of the esophagus is open so that the food passes without risk of taking the wrong path of the lungs. Stomach. The stomach resembles a J-shaped sac, located between the esophagus and the small intestine. It measures about 25 centimeters long, 10 to 12 centimeters wide, and 8 to 9 centimeters deep. It has a capacity of approximately 1.5 liters and has several functions. Serves a reservoir for the food, regulates the flow of the food bolus, squeezes the food thanks to the gastric muscle. Thus, when the nutrients enter into the stomach, they come into contact with the gastric juice, which is a biological fluid produced by the glands of the stomach's wall, called gastric glands. Liver. The liver is the largest solid organ in the body, and anatomically, it is divided into four lobes: right, left, square, and caudate. The liver is located in the upper right quadrant of the abdominal cavity. The liver performs some functions: storage of energy sources, production of cellular fuels, production of plasma proteins, metabolism of toxins, modification of hormones, production of bile acids, storage of iron and vitamins. Gallbladder. The function of the gallbladder is to receive, store, and concentrate the bile. This bile leaves the gallbladder and reaches the duodenum through different canals. Pancreas. The pancreas is located behind the stomach. It is an exocrine and endocrine organ. The term exocrine refers to the process of secreting substances through a conduit to the outside of the organ. The term endocrine is a process of secreting mediators or hormones directly into the blood. Small intestine. The small intestine measures an average of 6 meters, starts to the duodenum, and its last proportion connects with the cecum. It is a motor organ. In other words, the nutrients in the digestion and absorption tracts are propelled and crushed to promote contact between the chyle and the wall of the intestine. Larger intestine. This organ measures between 80 and 150 centimeters. The larger intestine has four regions identified: blind, colon, rectum, and anus. The caecum is a bag in which the appendix and the ileocecal valve are located. The colon is the longest section of the largest intestine and is divided into three parts: ascending, transverse, and descending. A segment in the form of S, the Simon colon, continues after the rectum and ends in the anus. Diseases. Gastritis. Gastritis is defined as an inflammation of the gastric wall and can take two forms: acute gastritis caused by the ingestion of alcohol, medications, bacteria, or chemicals. Peptic ulcer. An ulcer is a perforation of the stomach wall, the duodenum, or other section of the digestive tract. It can get worse because of stress, alcohol and medications intake, and smoking. Colitis and colon cancer. Colitis is inflammation of the largest intestine. Some causes are medications, stress, parasitic diseases, or alterations of the immune system. Colon cancer. Colon cancer rate has increased in recent decades. The history of relatives with this type of cancer is a risk factor, as well as having intestinal polyps.
Excretory system. It is essential that our body can eliminate its waste component. This process is called excretion. It is a metabolic process necessary to maintain the homeostasis. The urinary system consists of two kidneys and the excretory urinary tract, which is formed by the smaller and larger calyces, the renal pelvis, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra. Urine is produced in the kidneys. Urine is transported outside of the body through the excretory urinary tract. Lower ribs also protect kidneys, and they are lined with adipose tissue to avoid injury for trauma. Each kidney contains more than 1 million nephrons. Each kidney is made of 8 to 10 lobes, therefore they are multilobular. The urine results from filtering the blood plasma, which is the liquid component of the blood. Urine takes out metabolic wastes dissolved in water. 95% of the urine composition is water. In the kidney, two structures form and modify the urine: the nephron and the collecting tubules. Once the urine ends in transit through this renal component, it will not undergo further, and it will be discarded. The functions of the urinary system. The functions of the urinary systems are the regulation of the acid-base balance, the regulation of the circulating volume, and the production of the erythropoietin. Diseases: the kidney stones. Sometimes calcium, magnesium, or uric acid form salts that precipitate in pelvis or renal pelvis and form what we know as kidney stones. Acute Acute pyelonephritis and cystitis. It is an inflammation that occurs suddenly which affects the renal pelvis and the kidney and may be accompanied by an inflammation of the bladder.
Respiratory system. The respiratory system carries oxygen to the bloodstream and extracts carbon dioxide through respiration. Structure and function. The function of the respiratory system is to transport air with oxygen to the zone of the gas exchange in the lung, which corresponds to the alveolar region. There, the oxygen diffuses through the walls of the alveolar sacs and enters of the bloodstream, where the erythrocytes transport it. The respiratory cycles are involuntary and are regulated in the medulla oblongata and the protuberance that form part of the brainstem. These centers receive information from the other components of the nervous system, which allows adjusting the respiration rate to the physiological needs of the individual. In inhalation, diaphragm contracts, thorax expands, and lungs expands. In exhalation, diaphragm relaxes, thorax contracts, and lungs are compressed. The respiratory system extends from the nose to the alveolar sacs, and anatomically is divided into upper and lower airways. The structure of the respiratory system is nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveolus. Nasal cavity. The air path bends in the nasal cavity, which enters through the two holes called nostrils. In the hole of the nostrils, there are small hairs called vibrissae, sebaceous glands, and sweat glands that constitute the first vervet of protection against the penetration of particles. Pharynx. After it passes through the nasal cavity, air enters in the nasopharynx, which is a region of the pharynx lined by respiration epithelium. Larynx. In its wall, the larynx has several cartilage pieces that keep the tube open permanently to ensure the passage of air. Trachea. It is a continuation of the larynx. It is made of by a tube supported by 16 to 20 rings of hyaline cartilage in the form of C, with its free ends oriented towards the posterior portion and joined by the smooth muscle. Bronchi. The trachea branches into two primary bronchi that enter the lungs, which in turn divided themselves into three in the right lung and two in the left, supplying the different lung loops. Bronchioles. As for the bronchioles, which correspond to the smaller conductive pathways, they are lined by a type of epithelium other than the one found in the most of the conducting portion, consisting of a silented and circulatory non-silented cells. Alveoli. In the proportion where the exchange occurs, the diffusion of gases from and into the bloodstream takes place. To this proportion belong the respiratory bronchioles and alveoli sacs. Diseases. Bronchitis involves the inflammation of the airways, the bronchitis. It can be acute and it's usually the result of an irritative problem or an infection. Another alteration related to smoking is emphysema. This condition occurs when the alveolar walls break, which limits the surface and produces an adequate gas exchange. When the walls of the alveoli are broken, the ability of the lungs for relaxing and the contracting is lost. Asthma is another chronic condition that affects the respiratory system and is characterized by episodes of coughing, shortness of breath, and feeling of dryness. Lung cancer is related to smoking, air pollution, occupation, and weight of person. It is one of the diseases with the highest mortality rate, mainly among women, whose frequency has increased apparently due to the hormonal factors. Pulmonary tuberculosis is a disease that has accompanied humanity for several centuries. It was one of the most common causes of death during the 18th century. It occurs more frequently in populations with low economic resources or immunosuppressed. These facts became evident with the epidemic of the acquired immunodeficiency virus.